And I wanted to give you some experiences I had as a local Comcast regulator that gave me a lot of insight as to how powerful these companies can be sometimes in getting things changed legislatively. So way back in the early 2000s, I served on a local cable television advisory council here in Connecticut. These were created by the state legislature to allow local citizens to be a part of regulating the local cable television monopoly. And what we were there to do is really interface with the company, make sure that customer complaints were being resolved in a satisfactory manner for the customers, and report anything that we saw out of the ordinary to the Department of Public Utility Control to make sure that the companies were abiding by their franchise agreements. And basically what would happen would be probably every 10 or 13 years or so, the cable company would have to go in for a review to make sure that they were providing a level of service to the community that met the standards that everyone expected them to meet. And it was a very good system because it did require the company to actually do things for customers or risk losing their opportunity to have their local monopoly. And one of the requirements that Comcast had was to have a cable television access station, which I had a show on back in 1989 or so. And I did that in 89, 90 or so. And then I went off to high school to graduate and went to college and graduated. I came back in 98, 99. I wanted to start up some new show. And I walked into the studio there, and all of the equipment was exactly the same as it was back in 1989. Yet at home, I had a DV camcorder, and I was editing nonlinear on my PC with Premiere and everything. None of that equipment was at the cable station. They were basically back in the 80s still, with nothing ever invested into it. And I joined the council and started looking into this a little more, and I saw that the law required that Comcast have certain standards for the station that they had to meet. One was enough square footage, which they were lacking. They also lacked the ability to shoot a broadcast live to tape, for example, and also have somebody editing at the same time. They just didn't have enough rooms to accommodate those two functions nor the equipment. So I got on the council and we called Comcast on it and said, hey, you're not meeting the letter of the law here with your cable access station, and you really should be getting there because your franchise renewal is up in a couple of years. And sure enough, without having to have any DPUC regulatory action, Comcast acted and changed everything and renovated the studio, bought new equipment. It was great to see them act so quickly, partly because they were fearful of losing their very lucrative franchise agreement to continue that local monopoly. And wouldn't you know, right after the end of the legislative session, after all this stuff got resolved, the law changed, and their lobbyists went out and were able to convince members of the legislature to modernize the law and take out some of these things that really spelled out very clearly what they were supposed to do to meet their local cable television station requirements, which really was surprising to me that they could operate so efficiently and so quietly. There was never a news article about this. It just happened. And one day the law was this, the next day the law was that, and all of those requirements that we called them on were gone. Pretty crazy stuff. And we also had another issue related to that cable access station, which was that Comcast was not supplying enough funds to that station to keep it up and running. They were required to invest a certain amount of money in upkeep for the station. I think it was at the time $137,000 a year, and they were spending about taking $23,000 out of that requirement to account for accounting fees. And they found every possible thing they could to deduct from that overall contribution. They were even putting in the depreciation losses on a pair of headphones into that total. They really worked very hard to do that. We went after them on that and filed a complaint with the Department of Public Utility Control, and we won. In fact, the DPUC found that Comcast failed to sustain their commitment to the community, and they were required to put more money into it. But they were very good. It was us versus their law firm, their accountants, and they had a lot of documentation. There was pages upon pages of stuff that they submitted to try to defend themselves in this case, but ultimately the little guys and gals here won. But that is very rare that that kind of thing occurs. And on this net neutrality argument, a couple of years ago, I interviewed somebody who's an activist in this area who said it's just so difficult to even make a dent in your side of the argument, especially on something like net neutrality, because they have so many resources that they can pour in. They could probably have somebody meeting with multiple members of Congress at the same time, whereas these little groups that are trying to fight for consumers are lucky to have even one or two people that can take that time. So it's a very David and Goliath battle here, and these corporations, especially these monopolistic entities, will fight very hard to maintain those monopolies. It's their fiduciary duty as a public corporation to do so, and we as consumers have to find ways to fight that. And I think your members of Congress do need to hear from you on your thoughts about this. I think the FCC portion of this regulation at the moment is dead. They're going to remove that Title II, but the real fight here is Congress, and I'm hoping hoping that we can get something decent here that protects content creators like me and perhaps you, but also gives us the ability to have some competition as well. So let's see what happens here. It's going to be a long battle. I don't think anything's going to change overnight, but we'll be hearing a lot more about net neutrality in the months and years to come.
This channel is brought to you by my Patreon supporters, including gold level supporter Cody Falk. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to Lon.TV/Patreon to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/S.